2021 Audit Committee meeting. Caroline, can we have the roll call, please?
Sure.
Excellent.
Stephanie Woodruff.
Here.
Christy Mulcahy.
Present.
Al Castillo.
Here.
Adolfo Montoya. Mary Ellen Erpelding Chacon. We have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you, Carolyn. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Okay. Is there
circulated?
Excellent. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Motion is approved. Next item is the approval of the minutes. The last committee meeting, October 6, 2021. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion is approved. Next item, we're going to present the two audit committee. Let's see, I'm gonna make sure REDW is present today. Caitlin and Allie, and I don't know if Jessica is here.
She will be here. She had a conflict for the first 30 minutes of this meeting, but she will pop on. So whoever
Excellent.
is upgrading to panelist, when you see her come on, if you could
Excellent.
move her up.
Excellent. Well, I will turn it over to REDW. Go ahead, Caitlin. We're going to talk about the information technology and the police evidence room audit. So
Sure. Remind me which one goes first on the agenda?
let's do the IT.
IT first? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. First off, hello, everyone. So great to see you all. Let's go ahead. All right, IT first off. So, you know, what I would like to do is just kind of go high level through these, and then audit committee at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt me, stop me, whatever it may be. And I have Jennifer here, who is our IT expert, and she can handle any questions. And I'm not sure, I didn't see anybody from the department, but any questions you guys have, we can absolutely field with them and work through that. So this was the information technology internal audit. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into our observations. First one was over employee access. So when we talk about this, what we're meaning is access to all the City of Santa Fe systems that employee may have that privilege with. And human resources and IT need to work together for this process to function appropriately. And so what we found here was that forms and work order documentation was not on file for 4 transferred employees. So we could not tell if that previous access that they had to like systems, let's say in public utilities, for instance, had been terminated when they moved to police, for instance. We had 12 of 18 terminated employees that were not disabled on their termination date in accordance with best practice. That variance ranged from 10 to 156 days after termination. For 6 of 18 terminated employees, we could not conclude the account disabled date due to lack of documentation. And then 8 of 18 employees did not have an HR termination memo to generate the work order. 2 of these 8 had their accounts disabled 10 to 26 days after, while the remaining 6 did not have adequate documentation in place to verify that disabled date. What we also found was 5 of those memos were received from HR 1 week or longer after the employee had terminated. And then we also found that there weren't procedures in place to ensure departments are monitoring employee access to department software to make sure that access is appropriate for job title and function. So we did put this at high, naturally. And you can see we for most of these, we provide pretty robust, detailed recommendations. I don't want to spend a lot of time in those, but ultimately, you know, it's addressing, get a procedure in place, work with HR, get that collaboration moving, and get this really, you know, tightened up to where that termination is getting removed. As far as management's response to this, they did review and update that computer access control policy in March of 2020. They are going to go ahead and look at that policy revision by the end of fiscal year 22. And that's kind of where they left it. So this is going to be a really good one for us to go back on when we start what we call the follow-up internal audits, to really say, hey, what has been done here to really shore up this process? Because the last thing we want is employees that can still access city data if they're no longer with the city. Any questions on this one? I know this was a lot of information.
Is Mary on board?
I'm sorry?
Is Mary in the meeting? Mary McCoy?
Believe
Yeah, Mary's coming. Mary's joining us at about 2:30, but Alexis is here in her place. Yep.
And
You have a question now?
yeah, the question I have, I assume that you have accepted these findings and agree that they're correct. Is that a fair statement? From the-
Alexis?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
Oh,
Let me turn my volume up. Maybe that'll be better.
one thing that sticks out very prominently is the 10 to 156 days after termination that we're still in the system. And my question is, do you agree with those findings? Are those correct?
Do I agree with the findings that REDW is showing? Is that,
Mhm, yes,
yes.
you've signed off on these. Okay, thank you. That's
Well,
all.
I didn't sign off on it, but I have not, Mary did not inform me that she disagreed with them.
All right. That's
And Al, just as part of our process with the department, because we never ever want to issue incorrect findings with poor details, we provide what we call a detail of observation before the report is ever finalized. And it says, hey, here's all the specific items that we sampled where we found these issues, and they're given the opportunity to go and look and make sure they agree with our assessment, and they did not come back with any changes.
all right. That's
No.
good.
Yeah, so we never want to blindside the department. So, all right, next one is security awareness training. So as you guys know, in this day and age, we're constantly trying to get hacked, right, by various different sources. And so what's really important is making sure that employees are aware of the different mechanisms that hackers are using to perform potentially malicious attacks, whether that be email, phone, physical setting, whatever it may be. And best practice really recommends an annual training plan that is doled out regularly to keep employees up to date as to what these threats are. So what we do here is we perform interviews with the employees to kind of gauge their understanding and also see if there is that annual training plan in place. And what we found was there was not that security awareness training program with that continuous education component. And with our interviews, what we found was that 2 of 15 employees disclosed having clicked links or downloaded attachments from questionable emails. 8 of 15 didn't remember the last time they had training. 13 of 15 had remote access, but only 1 of the 13 said that remote security training had been provided. 6 of 15 didn't know the risks related with USB devices when you plug them into a computer. And 1 employee did not know how to contact IT to report a security incident, but would contact their supervisor. We also found, this should probably surprise no one, that multiple employees said that they don't read their emails from IT, which we see that everywhere. So we put this one as high as well. We recommended that training plan, that continuous component, and just working with employees to make sure they're aware of what to do. Management has since implemented a training platform called LocalGovU. It has modules on some of the specific items that we recommend. They're working with HR to implement those modules into citywide training. And then they also have committed to using their insurance provider to provide cybersecurity training as well. And they're wanting to get this implemented by end of fiscal year 22. So they are actively moving on this one and working through getting that information out to help further that protection of the network. Next one's over Windows operating systems. So
Can I ask a question, Caitlin?
sure, absolutely.
And maybe this goes more to Alexis or somebody else at the actual city. Wondering what kind of controls we have put in place. So one of the things like at my job, for example, is we have to do very specific security training about phishing emails and all kinds of security threats inside and outside. And if I'm not up to date on my training, I get locked out of the system and I have to I have to pick up the phone, call the IT department, get a temporary code, log in with my temporary code, and then basically the only thing I can do is my training. And then once my training is complete in 2 hours, then I will have system access again. But is there any way that we can implement such controls at the city? And maybe it's not the exact same thing, but a similar process. And what does that look like?
Sure.
Because if people aren't reading their emails and these training notifications come out in emails, then I'm not sure how we're going to get the message out.
Agreed. And one of our recommendations here is exactly that, for the city to work on establishing sanctions for those employees that are not doing that. And I know that's something that was discussed at length when we were in the exit with IT. And I think something that they actively support. I don't know what progress has been made on that because I know there are some complications, especially with, union contracts, making sure those agreements are in place. But does anyone from the city have any further knowledge on any progress related to that, or?
Yes, Caitlin, I know something IT sent out a few weeks ago was a training just for that.
Okay.
They documented it and it logged on their end that the training was completed, and it's talked about phishing scams,
Great.
those types of things. It was pretty sobering, so I thought it was really good, but I know that happened a few weeks ago.
Awesome. I'm super glad to hear that. I know they really, really supported this one and making sure that employees were versed on this. So yeah, I think definitely if we can get somebody on from IT, Alexis, I don't know if anybody is available, but it might be good to field some of these questions.
I thought we had.
Well, I'll continue. And then if anybody like Manuel or somebody's able to jump on and field some of these questions, I think that'd be great to hear where they're at. Because it's been a minute since this one was final. So
And we can always circle back with any follow-up questions also.
Sure. Okay. Okay.
I know
so
I know he was planning to attend, but he obviously got pulled away. So
okay,
we can definitely follow up.
Perfect. That sounds good. And I know we're condensed on time, so I'll go ahead and proceed. So the next one is Windows operating systems and updates. So this one's the new iOS system. I don't know if it's iOS, that may be the wrong term. Maybe that's only iPhones. I don't know, Jen, sorry. But this one, we found that 15 of the workstations had not had Windows updates applied since, 3 of 15 workstations that we tested in Workstation Security were running on an unsupported operating system. And 1 of the 15 had not had Windows updates applied since December of 2020. The other thing that we found is that there is an automatic configuration of these updates to install on workstations, but that is not actively monitored to ensure if one of them fails, they can relaunch it and get it figured out. So we did put this one at high as well. Had them, hey, go identify all these unsupported workstations, get them up to speed, and put that monitoring procedure in place to make sure that those updates are occurring as they should. They are looking to again implement this by the end of fiscal 22, and are monitoring using lab tech and in progress to remediate the issue. It looks like Bradley Purdy is in the meeting, but it isn't letting him speak. I don't know if
Could he
he can.
possibly call in? Is he on a computer or is he calling in? Okay.
I'm not seeing him. Is he on there?
He said he's raising his hand, but it isn't letting him speak.
Oh, because he's not a panelist.
Not a panelist.
He's only in as a attendee. Is Joe still here? Or Carolyn, is it possible to let Bradley in as a panelist?
I can't let him in, but I'm trying to reach Joe Beta right now.
Okay, I appreciate it, Carolyn.
I'm going to continue through the report, and then once he gets on, we can address all questions with him. Is that okay, Stephanie?
Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Carolyn, why don't you ask to have me host the meeting? So I can make these changes as needed?
Will
Okay.
do.
Thank you.
So next one was Workstation Security. So I've kind of touched on this one a little bit, is that we did interviews with 15 different individuals throughout the organization. And what we did here was really focused on individuals with heavy computer usage. So, we wouldn't want somebody that's out in the field a lot and not using technology. This is really people that are in front of a computer and, could really potentially, access a bad link or whatever it may be. So what we found here was all 15 workstations could access free proxy server websites. And so this is where you can kind of go undetected through these proxy websites and look at things that technically would not be authorized. Personal email websites were not blocked on this network, which could introduce malware. 13 of 15 workstations could access social media. 3 of 15 workstations were using unencrypted non-City of Santa Fe ITT issued USB drives. And then 1 of 15 had continuously failed to update the current antivirus, which we also spoke to in the previous observation. We put this one as high as well, because this, in combination with the absence of security awareness training, really kind of put both of these to high. We, as you can see, have quite a few recommendations here on how to shore this one up. And management's response here was that they have put those controls in to block those proxy web servers. They do have a policy in place that addresses social media in their acceptable use policy and are planning on implementing a more comprehensive policy. They do agree that our suggestions are reasonable and will work on implementing the controls that are technologically feasible by the end of fiscal year 22. As far as mobile devices, employees are authorized to synchronize email to city-issued mobile devices. There is a mobile device acceptable use policy in place, but there is no requirement for employees to acknowledge that they will comply with it. What we found here was 2 of 10 employees were synchronizing their email to a personal smartphone, not a city-issued one. One of these employees also acknowledged that they downloaded attachments to the personal device despite policy stating only city-issued mobile devices can be utilized. We had 8 of 10 that had not read the policy and therefore didn't understand what the policies were. 1 of 10 didn't have any of the biometric screening or PIN to access the phone, meaning anybody could access if it ended up in the wrong hands. And then 2 of 10 employees did not know the proper steps to take if the device was lost or stolen. In addition, none of these employees were enrolled in what we call a mobile device management solution, which helps with if, like, for instance, my phone gets stolen and I'm a city employee, IT can remotely wipe my phone to make sure that nobody can access anything or see anything that they shouldn't. This one, again, was put at high. Again, quite a few recommendations aligning to what we found. IT, again, felt this one was reasonable and is looking at working on the user training, providing copies of those policy and rule forms, and providing updated information to the end users by fiscal 22.
I need to comment here, Caitlin. So the other issue that this brings up is all city records, including email communications and text messages, are subject to IPRA under state law. These phones need to be imaged by IT, even though they are personal cell phones, because that makes them subject to IPRA. And if these employees lose or destroy or change their phones and these records are no longer able to be imaged in response to a IPRA request, the city will also have an IPRA violation on its hands. And the courts take those very seriously. So we need to make sure that we are working with IT to get these imaged.
That's you're talking about that electronic document retention state statute, right?
Yep.
Yep, you are spot on.
And we also.
It looks like Bradley's now joined us, so if there's any questions, we have IT now representing.
Yes, I'm available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Bradley.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christina.
So I don't know if we want to mark that as a follow-up item, but we need to make sure to have these phones imaged for State Records Act requirements. And then one of the things that employees need to be educated on too is that if you do this, your entire phone is now subject to IPRA.
Yep.
It doesn't
And I
matter
believe-
whether,
Go ahead.
whether it's, you know, you say, oh, well, it's just my Gmail. It does not matter. That's not how the statute works.
Yep. And Bradley, remind me, you guys don't, I mean, you guys are moving away from the personal cell phones having any content, correct? I mean, that was. Or remind me
Cell
what.
phones right now, we have a product called Sophos that is actually designed for managing, remote managing cell phones. It does things, allows us to do remote wipe and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. Problem we weren't in, it's so sophisticated that we actually need to bring on another staff member in order to help maintain that. And that's one of the ones we got approval for the last budget. And we're still in the hiring phase for that person to go start with the US.
Okay.
So those phones are city phones. We manage those phones from one end to the other. They're pretty well locked down. As we go forward and we still learn the more capabilities of the tools we have, we'll adjust it accordingly. We'll probably tighten it down a little bit too much, bring it back a little bit, and keep trying to go along until we get whatever we need. I wasn't aware of the HIPAA requirements to actually image complete phones. But I made a note of that and we'll look into it. If anybody on this call has specific links or anything they can provide me, I'd appreciate it. Send me what links you have and that'll help me out.
Well, Brad, as long as, so if, I think there's two issues here from what I'm understanding from Caitlin, is there's the city issued phones with city employees having their personal Facebook or Gmail or whatever account on it. And then I think there's a separate issue where people have their private phones with city information on it. Is that correct, Caitlin?
Nobody should have private phones connecting into our network. I'm not saying it's
And the
not happening,
Sophos,
but they shouldn't. at
now
this point in time.
Sophos will prevent people from, without having IT authorization, will prevent people from being able to link the email, right?
Yeah, Sophos is a complete, it's just like locking down laptops. Sophos locks down those phones too. We've been rolling out a lot of phones real quick recently though. So this COVID stuff has made us a little bit more loose on some of our policies that we need to go back and tighten them all up again, that we were doing beforehand.
Because
But
if
there's-
we have, oh, sorry.
There should not be any private phones connecting into our network. That's against our policy and procedures. I'm not saying it's not happened, but I've not seen any. And I don't think any were found in the audit doing that too, but I don't recall seeing any that happening.
We had 2 employees that had City of Santa Fe email on their personal smartphones.
Yeah.
Okay, that's different. The idea of, so there's a difference between having, there's a difference between having a mobile device that accesses our network and everything else we have versus being able to access your personal email. Your personal email we have available on our internal network too. And that's something that we're discussing and going back and forth with. The idea that right now, if a person in HR needs to access their Gmail account, they can do so. And that was one of the suggestions from the audit, that maybe we should lock that down. But that was also a discussion we had, that before we lock down things like being able to access your own personal emails from internal devices, that's a conversation between the city manager, our legal team, and a few others before we can take that. We can't just blanket do that from ITT. Might be a good idea. Sounds reasonable, but it's a matter of executives making those kind of decisions.
So what I'm saying, Brad, is those 2 phones of those 2 of the 10 employees who had synchronized their City of Santa Fe email to their personal phones, all of that phone has now become subject to IPRA by doing that.
Yeah,
And that's a problem. And so we need to figure out a way in which the information on that phone can be preserved as it relates to the city, because of the fact that if we don't, we also have an IPRA violation. The other phones that sound like they're connected to this network that's backed up through the city, as long as that information can be retrieved from a city server or the like, whatever our information preservation system looks like, that's fine, but we need to make sure that we're able to save the information from those other employees' phones. And I know it's only 2 phones, but judges don't like the appearance of avoiding IFRA by putting stuff on personal phones. They don't like that. And cities recently in New Mexico have gotten hit with pretty steep fees from employees doing that, even during COVID.
Okay, so Chris, I made a note of that. If you do have any kind of links you can send me, that's fine. If you don't, I'll still research it and we'll see what we can do. I know we also have conversations with employees about, that's one of the things I tell them is never send any other personal emails or personal correspondence on our city email, because all that is subject to being released at a judge's order.
Not at a judge's order, by a simple request to the city. You don't
Yeah.
even need a judge's order. By a simple request, they can file an IFRA request and the city has
Ends up having to
14
release
days-
it.
has 14 days to release it.
So I think they're doing better at that. And that's where we're going to run into a problem possibly with the idea if we remove them from the capabilities, at least from the laptops and others being able to access their own devices. But we'll have those conversations. And I think that in this conversation that you just brought up is really interesting. We can follow up on. And I think that RED brought up some points that we need to consider a lot more details.
And I have a question.
Yeah.
Along that line. Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Al.
this is the same kind of issue that surfaces with automobiles that are publicly owned, that are government owned. And it seems to me that what REDW has uncovered here could be pretty substantial and can come back and bite not only the city, but the individual employees. And it's encouraging that Bradley had pointed out that they did get approval for one person to help with this, the recommendations that are being proposed. My question to Caitlin is, will this suffice? Will this take care of some of the stuff that you have uncovered here? Will one person, because I think there's a lot of work to be done, is what I'm saying, with regard to the use of mobile phones. Caitlin, in your opinion, is this going to be enough remedy?
I think it's definitely in the right direction. I think those mobile device management solutions are really the answer to this issue, and educating employees about the importance of not using personally issued cell phones. And I think IT has definitely identified that and worked on it. And I think ultimately with our follow-up process that we will do as part of internal audit is going back in and saying, okay, what controls have you put in and have you resolved this? And can we go ahead and lower this risk and move forward? But I do think, and Jennifer, please feel free to chime in, I do think they are in the right direction of identifying the appropriate solutions to get this resolved.
Just one more comment along this line. It seems to me that one person doing this by himself or herself might require more team effort, in other words, to change the culture of the entire city structure, to recognize that this is public property. It has to be respected as such. And I'm suggesting that maybe Bradley could start the process of, as an IT specialist, to educate everybody, a memo here and there saying, look, folks, you can't use this stuff for your personal needs, or you can't do certain things with it, access certain websites and so on that are against public policy. So just that's my observation, that the culture of the use of public property within the city employment structure needs to be shifted a bit so that IT or someone, maybe finance department, can simply have people become aware that this is simply not their personal property. That's all.
Yeah, fair. So.
Yeah, and I think that those are great comments, Al. And I think especially now with COVID, now that, over the last year and a half, everyone's been more mobile. So maybe, a refresher for the employees so they understand, you know, the importance and really what the risk is. It's a good idea.
And also on your other comment, Al, I'm of course not going to object if anyone wants to advocate hiring of more cybersecurity personnel. The more
I
the
was
merrier.
suggesting that.
Yes, and I will not object to that.
Sure. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving because I know we have quite a bit to get through before the 3 p.m. hard stop. So next one, these next two kind of go hand in hand in a way. So you have the security incident response plan. And this is where if, you know, God forbid something happens, security incident wise, the city has a plan in place to respond to it. So they do have a documented security incident response plan, which is great. The only issue we found here was it hasn't been tested. So they haven't actually gone through the process of saying, will this work in the event of a security incident? And so that can result in potential inefficiencies and effectiveness, et cetera. So here we just recommend that they test it at least annually. They document that testing. In the instances right now where many of these organizations are dealing with ransomware attacks, we also recommend that collaboration with city leadership to make sure in the event of one of those, what is the city willing to take on to get that information back? How far are they willing to go? And making sure that those measures are in place so that they can react quickly. Management response here was that the testing is already on the plan for the year. And that they will incorporate this in and get it tested. So this is one we can follow up on and make sure that that testing is occurring and there's that policy in place to do it annually. So IT disaster recovery, similar situation here. There is a documented disaster recovery plan and a business impact analysis to accompany that. But what we found here, it has not been updated since 2016, nor has it been tested to make sure that the criteria within is still appropriate. We also found that the key elements listed there were not part of the disaster recovery plan. So here we just recommend that testing again, and then that phasing in of those key elements that we identified were missing. Management agreed it is a high priority for the department to get this done. They are holding a workshop this year to update that plan, hosted by the same research group that helped with the last one, and that the testing will be developed and will take place by the end of fiscal 22. So if you guys can't tell, IT is really, really busy through the end of the fiscal year.
Keep in mind also, as Caitlin's going through these, since we had this conversation quite a while back, some of these are complete, some of them are in progress, and some of them will happen in the future. Things like the disaster recovery, we already completed the workshop. We have an updated plan. We ran through a tabletop exercise. So I think we're good. I'll still want to take another look at that before the year's out. But a lot of this kind of stuff either is already completed or we're right in the middle of it. It's like you're going to talk in a moment about IT governance. We have a strategic update for the plan happening in just a beginning of January. And so before January is out, we'll have an updated for strategic plan, and then we'll start working on the governance side of it. So I think a lot of what you found is what we've been pushing for too. And it's really cool. They're in alignment.
Hey, let's plan to connect, Bradley, before we go to finance committee, which is middle of January. And I can get an update from you on where you guys are at so we can make sure we're communicating that.
I think that's good.
Okay, perfect. We'll touch base in the next couple of weeks. All right, so IT governance on this one, we just found that the IT governance committee had not been held since 2017 as a result of turnover, which is just a major issue a lot of places are facing right now. We also found here that there was no citywide strategic plan to benchmark that IT governance strategy and function too, which is really, really critical to making sure the goals and the visions align. So management has said that IT governance process implementation is high priority for them. They're looking to implement as soon as possible and working on getting that a formalized process by end of fiscal 22. And based on Bradley's comments, it sounds like there has been traction on that. So few more standard user agreements. So this is just that when an employee is hired, they sign that acknowledgement to the technology resources standard user agreement. We found 4 of 20 employees didn't have the form on file. And HR didn't have procedures to make sure that that form is obtained upon hire. So we recommend IT and HR collaborate to get this one figured out. They are going to work with HR and look at getting that documentation retention in place by end of fiscal 22. Remote access. So this one's a big one during COVID because most of us went remote. And so what we found here was that employees who wanted to obtain that access needed to complete an authorization form and obtain those approvals. And what we found was 19 of 20 didn't have that record of remote access on file to make sure that it was approved. And Jen, remind me, these were not like right at the onset of the pandemic, correct? We had looked into that to make sure, because we recognize that there was a lot of, just get people working at the start of the pandemic.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And so they are working on a strategy to mitigate the concerns on this one, and are working to hopefully get that kind of shored up by fiscal year 22. Again, super busy IT people right now.
So for things like those documentation, Caitlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, our old tracking system was awful. It just was old. And the good thing is, as part of the last year's budgeting, we got approved for a replacement system. And the guys are actively working on installing it. As a matter of fact, they're working on it today. So hopefully we'll get better. Because I remember during the audit, there was things that I remember seeing the documentation, but for the life of me, I couldn't find it in that system. But the new one should be much better.
Okay. Perfect. Awesome. So this one's IT PMPs. IT is doing great with the policies and procedures. We found that they had 27 of the 31 recommended policies by the NIST framework. The missing ones were in draft form. Really what we kind of found here was that there isn't that active review going on just to make sure that they're updated. But they had already, as of testing, implemented a way to get that done and work through those items. And so we put this at low risk. And they, like I said, they're working through kind of a process to make sure that these are getting looked at on a more frequent basis so they don't experience this long delay of update, and then working to get those draft ones approved. So any questions on the IT report before we transition to evidence? Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, this is a very detailed and extensive review, and I honestly can't remember the last time or if ever IT was reviewed. So this is REDW. You guys did an excellent job, and Manuel and Bradley, your team did an excellent job of responding, being available, and really, seeing that these, while there are a lot of findings, this is positive, and that this is positive progress forward. And that, this takes a team effort, and we appreciate everybody's hard work in this, especially during the pandemic. I know it was very, very difficult. If you think about when the pandemic hit and, basically from one day to the next, the IT department had to support the entire city working remotely, and ensuring that it was secure. It was an amazing job. So, not a small feat, and we look forward to REDW continuing with this process in the follow-ups to make this process even better. So thank you.
Great.
I want to do a final thank you to REDW, mainly because I've been sending out, we're preparing for our budget this year, and I send out requests saying we need another 10,000, 20,000 for this, because here was the audit findings. So it makes it really easy to justify. So I appreciate
That's
you
good.
guys' help.
We always love
Great.
when our audit findings can help things out. So
Yes.
That's
call
our
us
goal.
the friendly
Absolutely.
auditors.
Yes.
I'm going to drop
Awesome.
off the conference call. If anybody has any further questions or like details on any of these and what we're working on, just send me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you a lot further.
Great. Thank you, Bradley. Appreciate it.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you, Brad.
All right, moving right
Okay,
on.
the next one is, yep, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Stephanie. I'm excited to get going.
No. Next one, once again, this audit was very important because of all the issues in the past. And once again, I think this audit also, REDW did an excellent job, and the police department did an excellent job of being available and responding. So go ahead, Caitlin, I'll turn it over and jump into the issues here.
Sure. I definitely, before I get into the observations, want to make a quick comment that back when kind of all the evidence room stuff came out, the police department had a real uphill battle with this one. And I just want to commend them on the progress that they have made. They had detailed out that action plan, which is really what drove how we perform this audit. It's essentially us going in and saying, okay, you guys came out with this action plan, and have you made progress against it? And it blew us away at how much they've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. So while the observations may seem like, oh gosh, like really the progress has just been monumental. And I just want to make that very clear as we go through this audit that they've laid a very positive foundation. And these items are really kind of that next step of reaching that accreditation goal and just kind of shoring up again those final things. So I just want to point that out. Kudos to the police department on this. They've just been amazing. So what I'm going to do is again jump right into observations. So policies and procedures are our very favorite thing. So here they have two main policies that are surrounding that evidence and property management. And what we found here was that both of them were outdated and don't outline the policies, procedures, and best practices to meet the IAPE standards. And those are the standards that dictate accreditation. So those are important because that is the goal of the evidence room, is to achieve those accreditation standards. We did put this one at high and recommended that review of the policies and that implementation of updates. And the response here, and anyone on the police team, do feel free to jump in on this, is, there were things that needed to happen before these policies could really be tied down. And that was the staffing increases and that permanent supervisor position that needed to get filled. And then also they needed to go through that training from IAPE to make sure that they were aware of those standards and knew how to implement them. And so both of those things have since happened. And so that has really allowed them to transition into that policy and procedure update and completion. And they are getting, they've obtained policies from other accredited evidence rooms to help assist with them on this. This is a main priority for them right now. So they are anticipating these to be in place by end of fiscal year 22. And it sounds like they are well on track to get this done. So. Next area kind of piggybacks off the first one. So that's packaging and property manuals. And so here what we found, again, there weren't policies and procedures in place over proper packaging of evidence. And so what we found was that there were instances where evidence such as narcotics or hypodermic needles had not been packaged properly. And that puts those evident texts at risk of exposure. What we had also found is when we were actually performing the testing, when we were, the officers were pulling some of the evidence out of the boxes, some bullets fell out of an envelope. And so what we recommended here was a packaging manual that addresses how this, evidence should be packaged to really protect both the officers, the evidence techs, and anyone else that may be coming into contact with the evidence. So here they have actually already made quite a bit of progress. They have completed videos of how to properly package the items that are taken in as evidence. They are available on YouTube and placed in the common areas. They're in development for that packaging manual, which will be available to everyone as well. They're hoping the packaging manual itself will be done by end of fiscal 22, but the videos are already available. In addition, they've introduced a right of refusal process for the evidence text. If something's not packaged right, they can refuse it. There is a disciplinary step that can occur now when officers repeatedly doing this and not packaging things correctly. And so all of that is getting infused into policy and procedure as well. So it is documented. They have also standardized all evidence packaging across the department. And so that will be helpful as well to ensure that consistency. And again, implementation for all this by end of fiscal year 22 for what is still outstanding. So questions on that one? Oh, go ahead, Al. You're on mute. Oh, there you go. Okay. What's your question?
This was really a very major issue, and I see where the risk is high in some cases and so on. But it seems to me, to the credit of the city, the police department, from what you're saying, Caitlin, they simply have become serious about this and are implementing policies and procedures that will take care of the problem substantially. And to the extent that that is so, hooray for the internal audit that you guys have been doing, because this was a major issue that the public was concerned about too.
Yes,
Now,
and I think, you know, we, at the time of testing, when these observations were locked in, that risk level was at high. And the department just jumped on it, acted on it, got this stuff. They were already in motion on a lot of this, but really just got the ball rolling to where, I mean, they've just made, since the audit, have made such significant progress to getting these locked down and done. It's really been an incredible thing to participate in and see happen. I mean, like, it's really model leadership here of what's
that's good to
happening.
hear. All right, thank you.
No.
Sure.
Can I ask, Caitlin, I'm a little unclear. So I heard the statement that there's YouTube videos that are available about the correct packaging and labeling and marking of evidence. But what I'm not clear about is what kind of formalized training procedures there are for existing officers and also new hires, you know, to ensure that they're being properly trained on this. And then also, I think it might be prudent that the city get a form, like an actual form, and have every officer sign and acknowledge that they have taken this training, that they understand this training, and that this training will be updated on a, you know, I'm not an, I don't know, you know, what police requirements are, but every year, every 6 months, whatever those requirements are,
Sure.
I think that would be a really good process to have in place for the city.
Lieutenant Strahan, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's actually in one of our other management responses. We address that. The training, it's going to be included in biennium training for all the officers in the department. And for all new officers, they'll actually go through training. And everything is done in the police department through our training division. Everything is very well documented. We have state requirements, we have federal requirements, and we have departmental requirements that have to be met. And that's all well documented. So that is all part of the policy. So that's everything that you just said is important. It's addressed.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Awesome. Next area was chain of custody. So this is that chronological documentation of the evidence as it moves through its process. And so what we had found here was for one of 15 cases, 6 of the 9 items were indicated as being checked out to DPS Crime Lab when they were actually at the evidence unit. 1 of 20 was documented as checked out to the court when it was in the evidence unit, but it was just never signed back in. And then 1 of 20 was indicated as being checked out to an officer, but that record had not been updated as it was showing lab receipt, but it hadn't been updated anyway. What we also found here was that there was no centralized email address for officers to submit requests for evidence movement and supporting documentation. Instead, it's going directly to the specific evidence tech. And so when we were inquiring about specific cases, it became challenging to pull up relevant information if that specific evidence tech hadn't handled that case. So we had recommended here a diversion or chain of custody policy needing to be written and implemented, providing those directives for an officer signing out or signing in evidence. Infractions for non-compliance should be consistent and enforceable agency-wide. We also recommended that centralized email address to be put in place as well, and then that periodic training. The response here, so new staff are dealing with some of the older cases. Let me back up here. There has been a major implementation of new evidence software to date. So they are transferring from the AS400 system to the Evidence on Queue system. And this is a really, really great transition because anybody that's worked in AS400 will agree it's terrible. Evidence on Queue has an amazing capabilities, amazing functionalities, really great internal controls that can be set up. It's just a very, very powerful system that is really taking the evidence tracking into the modern century. And so basically what's happening as they're dealing with the old system going into the new system, they're verifying those locations, updating them in the new system. If they're not located, they're checking with the last verifiable person who had the custody and completing that investigation on the item's whereabouts. If they still can't find it, it goes up to professional standards for further investigation. They've also created new intake locations downstairs where those items are scanned in until they go to their final location. Officers are now required to scan and attach return receipts to the record or provide copy to the evidence text to scan and attach records. If it's not, that chain of command is notified. The centralized email address that actually now with evidence on queue is no longer necessary because evidence on queue allows for that multi-layer communication amongst everyone as opposed to just a single person. And then as far as the training, they, as you can see, wholeheartedly concur and are looking to add this to the biennium training and they are building out that training calendar as we speak, and that this piece will be included. So questions on this one? Okay. Annual comprehensive review. So city policy on this one, evidence management requires an annual audit of property held. And we had found on this one that no annual audits had been performed over the property and evidence functions. We had recommended implementation of an annual audit in accordance with policies that's documented and signed off on. And then just making sure that that audit aligns with the IAPE accreditation standards. So the staff have, like I said, they've been working very, very diligently to converting the old inventory from the AS400 into the new evidence on queue system. This has been very time consuming, and we agree it is very time consuming and definitely not as easy as it sounds. And so once this is done, then what evidence on queue will allow is a very streamlined, efficient annual audit process. However, and Lieutenant Strahan and team, I would actually advise that you guys kind of speak on the challenges that have been faced with this one in getting that old evidence into the new, that purge and all of that. Can you kind of quickly explain what's going on there?
Sure. So when we had the pre-accreditation visit by an IAPE auditor, he told us, he looked at our room. And I don't know if any of you have actually seen that pre-accreditation audit that we did way prior to this one. I don't know if you saw that or not. We can make that available. But one of the recommendations was our inventory was just extremely out of control. Their recommendation was that we do what's called an administrative purge, where we go through our system, identify cases that are older than the statute of limitations for prosecution, and take that list over to the DA's office, run it against their records, make sure there's no hangups on their end, to make sure that the clock has stopped for prosecution or there are outstanding warrants on any of those cases. Once that's done, they send back the list that meet the requirements for purging. And then we would approach a district court judge to issue what's called a blanket purge order. So we would attach the list. The judge would look at it, make sure everything's okay, say, okay, all of these cases meet the requirements. It's not going to go to court. So I'm giving you permission to destroy all of this because it can't be used anymore. So that was going to be about 80% of our inventory, which we have hundreds of thousands of items that have to be purged. And Caitlin's been in the room. She's seen it. Well, we have a couple of other facilities, but the plan was to purge all of that, and then the remaining inventory we could tackle and get into the new system. We ran into a small little problem with the DA's office. And, I don't want to say it's their fault. I know they have staffing issues also, but they were going to assign somebody to go through these cases, and now they're saying that they can't do that. They told us that they want us to go through 15 years of disposition orders one by one and do a purge on our own, and then they'll look at what's left. Problem is, it's 15 years worth of disposition orders that weren't done from the previous staff. And what we're also finding when we go in to actually physically look at the cases and the evidence, we're finding the paper forms do not match what is in the old AS400 system. We're actually finding more evidence on the paper forms than what's in the AS400 system. So now my evidence staff is actually having to go back in the record and add that new evidence into the new system as well as what was in the AS400 system. So this is going to take a very, very long time for us to get a handle on what we already have on top of what we already have coming in. Currently, just in the past year that we've had evidence on queue running, we're having about 5 items come in for every, 1 item that we can actually dispose of, just based on, the staff that I have to actually work these cases. That's on top of the old inventory project that we're doing. So yes, we did hire more staff, but what I thought was going to be a manageable project with the purge kind of went out the window. So we're chipping away at it, but at the current staff and the way things are going, it's going to take a very long time for us to do that. Once we get everything in the new system and we know what's in the room, we can do that audit and we can start using evidence on queue to do the functionality or use the functionality of the system that we have now.
Thank you for that. You explained it way better than I ever could have. So appreciate that. Any other questions on that one? I know, Christina, you have a hard stop at 3, correct? Which is like right now. So let me quickly get through the last one. So this is evidence ready for destruction. And so this is where we found here 2 of 20 samples tested were marked as ready to destroy, but could not be located. They didn't have a court case attached to them, nor had an owner been identified. And they appeared to have been destroyed, but not documented during that first round of destruction. And so here we just recommended that streamline and refine the process for evidence that's ready to be destroyed and disposed of. Evidence tagged as for destruction should be audited or inspected regularly to make sure it hasn't been removed. And those destructions should continue to be done at set times or when inventory reached a certain amount, which, as you just heard, is a little more complicated than we originally thought. So, so since the visit, they have created locations for items ready for destruction, which are scanned in. A regular schedule of times for destruction has been implemented, and 2 employees do a scanned audit of each location. They are tracked in the systems. Narcotics are verified by the staff and also by state police prior to incineration. And a signed copy of each list is kept on file by both agencies. So they have quickly remediated what it appears this one and put some great controls in. So,
Caitlin, I have just like 1 minute, but I do have to ask a question here because something came to mind. So when something's marked for destruction, is there a process by which the department verifies that in fact that is correctly marked so that we're not accidentally destroying evidence on a case that, let's say, is an open case that's going to be prosecuted?
Sure. Lieutenant Strahan and your team, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, and that goes back to this issue that we ran into with destruction orders with the dispositions. We're finding that some of those old dispositions, they're only listing 1 suspect on it. When my evidence techs actually go into the system and look at the actual case, there's multiple suspects. So what we have to do is we have to go to the New Mexico courts file system, check and see if the charges are done on those other defendants. And then we have to verify that with the DA's office. So that's what we're doing before we destroy anything, just to make sure that we're not getting rid of anything that we are not supposed to.
And if I could just add on that as well, many of these disposition cases are from prior administrations to the district attorney's office. So the current administration is not too comfortable signing off on some of the other dispositions unless they have a thorough look at that case. But with them as well, they're also facing capacity issues, which kind of compounds the issue. So when we come across these issues like Lieutenant Strand brought up, it's very challenging for us to go through that. And that's why we asked and requested that we have a blanket destruction order to cover these cases, because many of them, we're talking about cases that are past the statute of limitations that we just need validation that we can dispose of those items. The other high-risk items like homicide cases and those that don't have the statute of limitations, those ones can be held until we can get to those dispositions, but the vast majority are those that are past the statute of limitations. We just need them to validate these dispositions, and then that can help us offload a lot of this excess inventory.
Okay. I appreciate that from you both. Obviously, this is a major public concern as well as a concern for us on the audit committee, but it sounds like we have a good process in place now if we didn't before. And I commend the department on taking these steps. And with that, I don't mean to go, but I have to sign off. Is there anything that we don't need any more votes on anything, right? We're good with our quorum stuff.
No.
Okay.
No, the next item, nope, the next items, we're just gonna, it was a good idea to suggest to kick off 2022 with the new risk assessment. That's all, but
Madam
nothing that
Chair?
needs to be voted on, no.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Thank you,
Yep.
Christina.
Thank
Yep.
you all very much, and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Member Castillo, you have a question?
yes, I'm not sure what the rules are here for a public meeting, but before Chris leaves, shouldn't we adjourn? Because that's a valid motion. And if we want to continue the discussion just informally, we might be able to do so. I don't know.
I think she just dropped, because she has a call at 3:00, so she's running late.
Okay. Well, does the meeting continue then? Because we don't have a quorum.
To my understanding, it can, but we just can't vote on anything.
All right.
No.
So if we have to
We
go
can't
to
even vote on
adjournment, we'll just all hang out until she can come back,
We can't even vote on adjournment, I guess.
right? Who's bringing the chips and salsa? Like,
I'm not trying to be picky. I just
Don't you already have
tried
them?
to, 'cause we're being recorded and this is a public meeting.
I know.
So anyhow,
Excellent.
continue.
Yep. Well, the last, like I said, those two audit reports were very important. And once again, thank you again, REDW, for your hard work, and for the police department and for the IT department for their cooperation, because they were very significant. And I look forward to positive progress as we go down the road. The next item is that it was suggested, and Al, I want to get your comments on this, that we do a new risk assessment for 2022, starting in 2022. The old risk assessment we had was about 3 years ago that REDW has been working on, but we want to start that in January because of the new administration, a couple new council members, new structure within the city. I just think it's a great idea to do that high-level risk assessment, which will then guide the audit plan over the next few years. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to comment on your approach that we're thinking about starting in January for that.
sure. So what we would essentially do is we had originally kind of developed the fiscal year 22 audit plan. And had highlighted, I think, 3 or 4 internal audits. But as we've, continued to work with the city and really gain that understanding of the city over the past few years, we really felt it would be more beneficial at this point to kind of hit pause, go back and say, look, we're going to do a citywide risk assessment. And that involves talking to elected officials, department directors, city management. I mean, it is very broad. And we anticipate that to take about 300 hours. And we then say, okay, we're going to take all this information and we're going to perform our risk assessment procedures. And we're going to determine where we think what we're going to call the fires, the big fires are. And what we'd like to do is do more smaller, comprehensive audits on kind of what we deem the higher risk areas, and basically try to get more accomplished across a broader scope. throughout the year to really give the city, the audit committee and finance committee that roadmap of saying, okay, here's really where our high risks are. Here's where the focus and the resources need to be. And so that they can make those action plans and start working off of that instead of kind of like, we don't know what's out there necessarily. And so we feel that this is a really strong way to set the city up for success to getting that roadmap in place and really being able to identify and work through the really key issues that are really, really, actually the problem. And so that's our suggestion. And so we wanted to bring it forth to audit committee to kind of say, hey, we think we're going to go ahead and essentially kind of scrap the remainder of the plan, shift to this idea, build a new audit plan that then will kind of take in these ideas and where we think the remainder of the FY22 resources should go. And then moving into 23, what that year will look like as well.
No.
So.
And I agree with that approach. I mean, if you look at the last,
Sorry, Steph, go ahead.
That's right. There's been a little bit of delay. I agree with that approach. And if you look at the last year and a half, you guys have performed the review of the lease and lease accounting, utility billing, the IT, police evidence, and then now you're wrapping up the HR and payroll review. So
we actually, HR and payroll has not made, I would not deem it progress at all. So.
Okay.
That one I would recommend not scrapping that audit. I think we've gotten far enough in it that it would not be smart to get rid of it. So I'm thinking the risk assessment and the HR audit is kind of fulfilling the hours, and then we can see what's left to see if we can put in another audit or go from there.
Perfect.
So,
just to add on to that, one of the main differences is going to be, and we've talked about this in the committee meetings before, do we do bigger audits or do we get more coverage and do smaller audits? And, over the past year or so with working with you guys, COVID confuses me. It might be longer. It probably is. The smaller audits, I think, is the way to go. It will give us more coverage. It'll let us touch more areas, identify the highest problems and get them all moving towards those corrective actions. And then we can circle back with them and do that next round, in a cycle type manner.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And part of that with that risk assessment and doing smaller audits is also doing the required follow-up on the audits you just completed over the past year, especially the last two that we just completed, along with utility billing and lease accounting. So I think given the past history and moving forward, that this is a great approach for the city to give us a broader coverage. And I think REDW has been an excellent partner for us because now that you're a few years in, I think that you have enough knowledge now that we can leverage that and really hit more areas faster. So like I said, I'm excited about kicking off for next year to see where that risk assessment takes us. So
are we.
Excellent.
So Stephanie, do you need us to prepare kind of a vote for email, or is this informational or what?
Just informational.
Okay.
Just information. Yep.
Great. So then what we will plan to do is beginning early January, we'll reach out to everybody, start getting the interview scheduled. And then hopefully it can usually be a pretty quick process. So hopefully by late February, early March. No, Jess is shaking her head. I don't know.
You're scaring me. I think you'll need to, because it's going to be, our schedules, the three of ours going through this. So let's regroup on that and check. I don't want to overcommit and under-deliver on that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think one. Let's say that.
I think the timing of this, if we shoot for a March audit committee meeting, because we have to meet every quarter. If we shoot for a March committee meeting to have, the results of the risk assessment, or at least, using the 80-20 rule, and then the HR and payroll review, that would be my idea anyway. To have that for our first meeting in March.
That works.
That'd be-
Okay, perfect. Well then, hey, we have our marching orders. So I need to touch base with Mary on the HR payroll audit and get that one back on track. So we will plan to do that and the risk assessment, and that's where our focus will go. So
Excellent.
great. Well, thank you all for the time.
Perfect. Thank you. So any new business? Any matters from staff? Any matters from the committee?
Good luck, y'all. I'll be tuning in as a member of the public in the future.
Well, once again, Member Castillo, I couldn't have done it without you.
Oh,
You've
I don't know
been,
about that.
you've been an incredible resource. Seriously, you've been an incredible resource. How many years have you been on the committee, Nick?
I think it's 5 years, which is
Yeah,
long.
yeah, I think it has been 2 terms.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
I'm gonna
Thank
miss
you all
you.
very much.
Thank you. I appreciate all your insight.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, I guess we are ready to adjourn, but we can't vote on that, so. Excellent. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
So move. Excellent. Thank you, Al. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. You too.
Happy holidays, everyone.